The history of wildlife in North America can be traced back to 11,500 BC, when Native Americans shared the continent with an impressive assortment of large mammals and birds, some the size of a Volkswagen Bug. Today, humans are not alone, as we are one of countless life forms that share this planet we call Earth. In Colorado, there are over 900 species of wildlife that make our community home.
Wildlife is any of those animals that are free roaming. So they're out on their own, they find their own food, they find their own shelter, they find their own water. They really don't need our help in order to survive. The Front Range is unique because you have the mountains to the west and you have the plains to the east, so you get a lot of those species that enjoy both of those habitats or need both of those habitats kind of come together right here on the Front Range. Habitat consists of food, water, shelter, and space. If an animal can find any one of those things in an area, you can find them there. Urban areas are unique in that not only do they have a lot of those things already, but we actually enhance a lot of those things as well. We plant these beautiful brushes and shrubs which create great shelter. We leave a lot of food out for them, leaving out trash or feeding our pets outside. That is all food sources that can also bring them into urban areas. And then also water sources. We create ponds, there are ponds already. So not only is a lot of this habitat already in urban areas, but we tend to enhance that as well. I think there's a lot of positive impacts to wildlife, but a lot of that is in the eye of the beholder, I suppose. A lot of people, I think, come to Colorado or choose to make Colorado their home because of the wildlife resources the state has. We have a lot of people that live in Colorado or come to Colorado to hunt. A lot of people enjoy fishing in Colorado. So there's a lot of different ways that people just enjoy seeing wildlife, using wildlife. They also have a lot of benefits among each other. They control their own populations and populations of other wildlife species. And then also the environment. They pollinate flowers, they spread seeds, so they really help the environment as well. So there's a ton of benefits to having wildlife. Biological surplus is the reproductive potential of a species to be able to maintain a population year after year. So every year we will get a biological surplus for a certain amount of time. What it's dependent on is the habitat. So you have enough habitat for 20 rabbits, and then the biological surplus is how many rabbits would they have to produce in order to maintain that 20, because there are things that are going to take numbers out. So how many rabbits would have to come in there to maintain that 20? So for a certain time of the year, we do have a biological surplus, but there are things that bring that number back to what the habitat can support. A few of those things that bring that number back down are, if there's too many, starvation can be one of those. In areas where hunting is a factor. Accidents, so we have vehicle and wildlife collisions. Predation, so other animals coming after them. We also have immigration, so animals moving out of an area. If there's not enough resources there, they will go to other areas. And then of course disease can be an issue as well. So there's a lot of things that keep it in balance, but you will get biological surplus, but the habitat is what will regulate it over long term. Wildlife conservation is very important. Having that balance in wildlife really kind of makes everything run smooth in the environment. So in order to maintain that balance, we really have to practice conservation, or that wise use of our wildlife resources, in order to maintain that balance.
The presence of wildlife can be a delightful experience for people to view. However, their close proximity can sometimes pose serious and dangerous conflicts.
Wildlife don't like to be around people. They don't like people to come up to them. They don't need us in order to help them. They are wild, they have an inherent nature to be wild. They have that survival tactic. So if you take a wild animal and try and cage them, it can be a safety issue for both humans and for that animal as well. So there's safety reasons why you wouldn't want a wild animal to be a pet, but also their nature is to be wild, to be free roaming. We talked about aggression being one of those conflicts as well. And again, feeding is what typically leads to that. Again, those wildlife getting too comfortable with people to where they lose a little bit of that wariness of people and they start coming too close. And that's when we start getting the safety issues with wildlife. The negative impacts of wildlife, I would say that again is in the eye of the beholder. What one person sees as a conflict, another person might not. One person might love seeing a ton of wildlife in their yard, where the neighbor might not want that much in their yard. So it really is in the eye of the beholder. It's personal feelings on how what people's comfort level is with wildlife.
National, state, and local laws have been established to protect certain species of animals.
Our laws are typically made to protect people and wildlife, so it does both with a lot of our laws. We have laws of illegal possession of wildlife. That's both from hunting and fishing, not taking too many or having a license to do that. But it also comes back to taking, like we talked about, the pet wildlife. So you can't possess wildlife unless you have a license in order to do so. That is, again, to protect both the animals as well as to protect people. There's also laws that protect wildlife. There are feeding laws, which is something that we see quite often in metro areas. And that law is also to protect both people and wildlife. The laws do range from federal to state down to local, and it's going to be the most restrictive that does apply. So federal laws are going to protect a lot of the migratory birds, and then state laws will protect all of the state wildlife. And then a lot of local cities and counties have other feeding ordinances or other laws to protect, individual populations. The responsibility of coexisting with wildlife really does rely on us, only because wildlife, we can teach them to an extent on where they're comfortable and where they're not. We want them to be uncomfortable in our yards or areas where we don't want them. That's going to be on us to kind of teach them that aspect of it. Now, as far as, wildlife, basically, they're looking to survive. Their goal is to survive. So they're looking for a place to eat, a place to find water, and a place to find shelter. That's their goal. So anything that in order to get them out of an area, we really have to break that cycle. So it is going to be on us to know, what are they looking for? Why are they in my yard? And what can I do to encourage them to stay out of my yard? And again, excluding or restricting whatever it is that's attracting them, and then kind of hazing them to the extent where they're not comfortable in that area, and especially not comfortable around people.
We've all had it happen. You look up from a trail just in time to see an animal dive out of sight, or witness a swoop of a wing or slap of a tail behind a tree. It's the beauty of wildlife, and it's happening every day in Greenwood Village.
Wildlife have very keen senses because they're either looking for something to eat or looking to not be eaten. So their senses are very keen. They have great eyesight, they have great hearing, they have a great sense of smell. So I think that most of the time, wildlife is going to know that you're there way before you know that they're there. So I think that they do know they're being watched. In a lot of areas, you really have to keep a pretty good distance in order to be able to see wildlife in their natural setting so that they're not running off or acting different because you're there. In urban areas, we're a little bit luckier because they see people on a daily basis, so you really can get a little bit closer to view wildlife. Along the Highland Canal, people walk this every day, so you can get a great wildlife viewing experience right here. So my suggestion would be, do like you normally would do, walk the Highland Canal, have some binoculars so you don't have to get quite as close, be less chance of them running off, so you can get a great viewing experience. Some of the other things you might want to have with you in addition to your binoculars would be if you're going to walk the Highland Canal looking for birds, have some bird identification books so you can figure out what you're looking at. Also, just because you don't see wildlife doesn't mean that they're not here, they haven't been here. So really, watch for other signs of wildlife as well. Watch for tracks, watch for scat. You'll be amazed at how many animals have been through that area you've walked when you look for other signs rather than just seeing that individual animal. Other things to do before you go out is if you're looking for a certain species, there's that one thing you really want to see is study up on it a little bit and try and figure out where it's going to be. You'll find some animals in certain habitats and other animals in other habitats, and figure out what times of day they're active. That way you can really hone in on where you're more likely to see certain animals. For example, if you're wanting to see ducks, you want to go over near the ponds, but if you're wanting to see hawks, you would need to go more towards the cottonwood trees and over in that area. So try and figure out what you're wanting to see and where you're most likely to see them, and also the time of day you're most likely to see them.